That Christmas Eve, the entire town believed it was safe. The lights were warm, the snow was gentle. Laughter filled the square, and no one was thinking about danger. No one was thinking about death. No one, except a golden retriever standing perfectly still in the crowd. He wasn't barking for joy. He wasn't chasing children. He wasn't looking at the lights or the gifts. He was smelling something no human could see. And without him, Santa Claus would not have survived that night. Snow had been falling over Maple Ridge since late afternoon, the gentle kind that softened edges and made even old brick buildings look forgiving. By the time the sun slipped behind the mountains, the town square glowed like something lifted from a holiday card. Strings of white lights wrapped every lamppost. Wreaths hung from storefronts that hadn't changed in decades. Children dragged their parents toward the smell of cocoa and roasted nuts, their breath puffing out in excited clouds. Ethan Miller stood near the edge of the square, one gloved hand wrapped around a worn leather leash. At the other end of it sat Buddy, a full-grown golden retriever with a thick winter coat and calm, intelligent eyes. Buddy had been coming to this Christmas Eve festival for years. People knew him. Kids hugged him. Strangers bent down to scratch behind his ears like they had permission. Tonight should have been no different. Ethan scanned the crowd the way old habits demanded. He told himself he was just being careful, that years as a firefighter never really left you. You learned to read rooms. You learned to notice when something didn't quite belong. Still, this was Maple Ridge on Christmas Eve, the safest night of the year, or so people like to believe. Buddy sat at his side, obedient, steady. At least at first. When the music swelled from the speakers near the temporary stage, Buddy's ears flicked. Ethan felt the leash tighten just slightly. He glanced down, expecting to see the dog distracted by food or noise. Instead, Buddy's head was lowered, nose hovering inches above the packed snow. His tail, usually slow and friendly, had gone rigid. "What is it, boy?" Ethan murmured. Buddy didn't look at him. The dog stood, slow and deliberate, and took a few steps toward the rear of the stage where volunteers and performers moved in and out of a narrow fenced area. Ethan followed, puzzled. Buddy had never cared about the backstage bustle before. He usually preferred the crowd, the attention, the warmth of people. Tonight, Buddy pulled again. Ethan stopped him gently. "Easy. It's nothing." But Buddy strained forward, breathing deep, his chest rising fast. He let out a low sound, not quite a growl, not quite a whine, just enough to make Ethan's spine tighten. Behind the stage, Frank Collins was adjusting the red coat of his Santa suit, laughing with a volunteer about how heavy the fake beard felt this year. Frank had played Santa for as long as anyone could remember. He wasn't a performer by trade. He was a retired mechanic who did it because the town asked him to, because children believed him, and because he believed in keeping things simple and kind. Laura Bennett, clipboard in hand, paced nearby, her eyes flicking between her phone and the clock mounted on a light stand. The live stream numbers were higher than last year. She smiled, relieved. Everything was running on time. Buddy suddenly stopped dead. His nose pressed to a patch of snow near the back wall of the stage. He inhaled sharply, then lifted his head and looked straight at Ethan. There was no confusion in his eyes, no excitement, only urgency. Ethan's mouth went dry. He knew that look. Years ago, in smoke-filled hallways and burned-out basements, Buddy had worn a harness instead of a holiday bandana. Back then, when Buddy froze like this, it meant something was wrong, something invisible, something deadly. "That's enough," a voice called out nearby, light but firm. A volunteer smiled nervously. "Probably just smelling the heaters. They're blasting tonight." Ethan nodded, forcing a smile in return. He didn't want to be that guy, the one who saw danger where there was none, the one who disrupted a town tradition with nerves and old memories. He tugged the leash gently. Buddy didn't move. Instead, the dog lowered his body, paws spread slightly on the snow, as if bracing himself. His breathing quickened. A faint tremor ran through his shoulders. The music swelled again. Children began lining up near the front of the stage. Somewhere, a bell rang, signaling that Santa would appear any minute now. Ethan crouched, pressing his forehead briefly against Buddy's. "Talk to me," he whispered, knowing full well the dog couldn't answer the way he needed him to. Buddy's response was simple. He pulled toward the backstage door and let out a sharp bark that cut through the cheerful noise like a crack in glass. A few heads turned. Laura frowned. Ethan stood, heart pounding, torn between instinct and embarrassment. Snowflakes landed on Buddy's fur and melted instantly from the heat of his body. From the heat of something else, maybe. Something Ethan couldn't see. Something the dog could. For the first time that night, the warmth of Christmas felt thin. And whatever Buddy was smelling, it wasn't celebration. Ethan tightened his grip on the leash, forcing a calm he didn't feel. Buddy's bark had drawn a few looks, nothing more, but it was enough to make the wrong kind of attention ripple outward. People smiled awkwardly, the way they do when something almost interrupts a good moment, but doesn't quite. Someone laughed, a child clapped, thinking it was part of the show. "Buddy," Ethan said quietly, firm now, "heel." The command had never failed before. Buddy shifted his weight, but did not return to Ethan's side. Instead, he angled his body toward the narrow passage behind the stage, nose working hard, chest rising and falling too fast for the cold. His ears flattened, and the low sound came again, deeper this time, edged with strain. Ethan felt it in his gut, the old, unwelcome certainty. This wasn't excitement. This wasn't confusion. This was recognition. He stood and looked toward the backstage area. Temporary fencing, plastic tarps, extension cords snaking across the ground, portable heaters humming to fight the mountain cold. All of it looked ordinary. All of it looked wrong. "Sir?" a voice said behind him. Ethan turned to see Deputy Mark Reyes approaching, hands resting near his belt, expression polite but guarded. Mark had grown up in Maple Ridge. He knew everyone, or at least knew of them. He nodded at Ethan, then glanced down at Buddy. "Everything all right here?" Mark asked. "Probably," Ethan replied. He hated how uncertain that sounded. "My dog's acting strange." Mark followed Buddy's line of sight, then shrugged lightly. "Big crowd, loud music, lots of smells. Happens." Ethan nodded, but his eyes stayed on Buddy. "He doesn't usually react like this?" Mark smiled, friendly but firm. "We're about to bring Santa out. I just need to keep this area clear, all right?" Before Ethan could answer, Laura Bennett appeared, her heels crunching against the snow as she moved briskly toward them. Her face was tight with focus, phone pressed to her ear until she pulled it away and lowered her voice. "What's going on?" she asked. "Dog's getting agitated," Mark said. "Nothing serious." Laura glanced at Buddy, then at the small cluster of people who had begun to notice. Her jaw tightened. "We're live in less than 3 minutes. Can you move him back toward the square?" Ethan opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. He felt suddenly foolish. This was Christmas Eve. This was his town. He was standing between a golden retriever and Santa Claus, like the world was about to end. "I just want to check something," Ethan said. "Back there. Won't take a minute." Laura shook her head. "No, we've got equipment running, volunteers moving around. It's not safe. Please." Buddy lunged without warning. The leash snapped tight, jerking Ethan forward. Buddy planted his paws in the snow and pulled toward the backstage door, claws scraping hard enough to leave pale lines on the packed ground. He barked once, sharp and loud, then again, his voice cutting through the music. A few people gasped. Someone muttered. Laura's eyes flashed. "That's enough," she said. "Mark?" Mark stepped forward, raising a hand. "Easy, boy." Buddy twisted, trying to break free, his breathing now a harsh rasp. Ethan dropped to one knee beside him, heart hammering. "Buddy," he whispered, "look at me." For a split second, the dog did. His eyes were wide, urgent, fixed on Ethan with a plea that went far beyond obedience. Then his attention snapped back to the door, his nose dragging across the snow, stopping abruptly at the base of the stage. He began to paw at the ground. The motion was frantic now. Snow flew. One claw caught on a rough edge beneath the thin white layer, and Buddy yelped softly, but didn't stop. When Ethan grabbed his collar to pull him back, his fingers came away wet. A smear of red stained the snow. Ethan froze. Mark saw it too. "He's hurt," Mark said. "He did that himself," Laura snapped. "We can't have this right now." Ethan rose slowly, anger and fear twisting together in his chest. "He's trying to tell us something." Laura exhaled sharply. "With all due respect, this isn't the time." Behind them, Frank Collins let out a cough, dry and persistent. A volunteer handed him a bottle of water. Frank waved it off with a grin, though his face had gone slightly flushed beneath the fake beard. "Just the cold," Frank said. "Let's give these kids their Santa." Ethan's gaze snapped to him, then back to Buddy. Something brushed past Ethan's leg. A man he didn't recognize crossed behind the stage, carrying a battered tool bag. He moved quickly, head down, hood pulled low. As he passed Buddy, the dog went still. Completely still. Buddy lifted his head, nostrils flaring. His eyes locked onto the man, tracking every step. The low sound returned, deeper than before, vibrating through his chest. The man didn't look back. Ethan watched him disappear toward the equipment area, unease blooming into something colder. He followed Buddy's stare, then looked down at the blood on the snow, at the way Buddy's whole body shook with effort. "No," Ethan said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "This isn't nothing." Laura checked her phone again. "Santa's going out," she said. "Now." The music swelled. The crowd cheered. The backstage door opened. Buddy pulled once more, harder than before, ignoring the pain in his paw, ignoring Ethan's commands, ignoring everything except the invisible threat only he could sense. And as Frank Collins took his first step toward the lights, Ethan felt a sinking certainty settle in his bones. Whatever Buddy was smelling, it wasn't fading. It was getting closer. The applause rolled across the square like a warm wave, drowning out everything else. Children leaned forward, phones were lifted, and parents smiled with the kind of relief that comes from traditions behaving exactly as expected. For most of the crowd, the night was unfolding the way it always had. Santa was here. Christmas was safe. Ethan stood just beyond the edge of the light, Buddy still pulling against the leash, the dog's weight braced low and stubborn. The music vibrated through the ground, through Ethan's boots, through Buddy's paws. He felt it all wrong in his chest, the way you do when a familiar place suddenly feels unfamiliar. "Sir," Deputy Mark Reyes said, stepping closer now, his voice firmer than before. "I need you to move back. You're causing a disturbance." Ethan looked at him, then past him, toward the stage. Frank Collins was halfway to center now, waving with exaggerated cheer, the red suit bright beneath the lights. The fake snow machine puffed a fine mist into the air, drifting lazily across the backdrop. It looked harmless, beautiful even. Buddy barked again, sharper than before. Several people turned. A woman near the front frowned. A man shook his head. Someone muttered that dogs shouldn't be this close to the stage. Laura Bennett moved quickly, heels crunching over snow, her clipboard tucked tight against her chest. "Mark," she said under her breath, "we're already trending. I can't have this turning into chaos." "This isn't chaos," Ethan said, before he could stop himself. His voice came out louder than he intended. "This is a warning." Laura's eyes snapped to him. "From a dog." Ethan nodded. "From a dog who's never been wrong." Mark hesitated, caught between procedure and familiarity. He lowered his voice. "Ethan, I respect your service. I really do. But right now this looks like a dog reacting to noise and equipment. We can't shut down a town event because of a hunch." Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. He knew how this sounded. He knew how it always sounded, right up until it didn't. Behind them, a small voice broke through the tension. "Mister?" Ethan turned to see a boy standing alone near the edge of the square, bundled in a puffy blue coat that swallowed his small frame. His cheeks were red from the cold, his eyes wet. "I can't find my mom," the boy said. Ethan crouched instinctively, his attention splitting. "Hey, it's okay. What's your name?" "Tommy." "All right, Tommy, we'll find her." As Ethan took the boy's mittened hand, Buddy shifted restlessly, whining now, the sound tight and strained. His injured paw left another faint red mark in the snow as he moved. Laura exhaled sharply. "This is exactly what I mean. Mark, please." Mark nodded, distracted now by the child. "I'll help him find his mother," he said. "Ethan, take your dog back toward the square, please." Ethan glanced down at Buddy. The dog's eyes were locked on the rear of the stage, unblinking. His body trembled with effort, every muscle screaming restraint. "I just need 30 seconds, Ethan said. "Let me look back there." "No," Laura said. "We're done with this." A man brushed past them, moving quickly, carrying a dark, scuffed tool bag slung low at his side. He kept his head down, hood pulled tight. Ethan barely noticed him at first. Buddy did. The dog went rigid again, the way he had earlier, only worse. His breathing stuttered. His head snapped toward the man, nose lifting, pulling in the air as if trying to seize something before it vanished. A deep, vibrating growl rolled out of his chest, low enough that only those closest heard it. The man flinched, just slightly. He didn't turn around, but his pace quickened as he slipped behind a stack of equipment near the heaters. Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the snow. "Did you see that?" he asked. Mark was focused on Tommy, scanning faces in the crowd. Laura was already turning away, phone to her ear again, barking last-second instructions. No one else had noticed, or they had, and dismissed it just as quickly. "Buddy," Ethan whispered, gripping the leash with both hands now. Buddy dragged him a step forward, claws scraping again. He began to paw at the snow near the base of the stage, frantic, digging as if something beneath the surface needed to be exposed. His injured paw struck the ground again and again, blood staining the white. Ethan's heart pounded. He looked from the paw to the stage to the equipment humming behind it. Portable heaters, extension cords, plastic tarps, fire, gas, air that could turn deadly without anyone seeing it. "Mark," Ethan said sharply, "listen to me." Mark looked up, irritation flickering across his face. "What?" "My dog's reacting the same way he did on a gas leak in 2009. Same posture, same sound, same panic." Mark hesitated, just a beat too long. Behind them, the music swelled higher. The crowd roared as Santa reached the center of the stage, lifting his arms wide. Fake snow drifted down thicker now, catching the light, turning the air into glitter. Frank Collins laughed, a big, jolly sound that echoed across the square. Then he coughed, once, twice. He lowered his hands, shifting his weight. For a moment, his smile faltered. Buddy barked, loud and desperate. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He took a step forward, pulling against Mark's outstretched arm. "Something's wrong," Ethan said, his voice shaking now. "You can feel it, can't you?" Mark opened his mouth to respond. Frank swayed, just a little. Most people didn't notice. They were clapping too hard, cheering too loud, believing too deeply in the story they wanted this night to tell. But Ethan saw it, and Buddy saw it. And whatever danger was creeping through the air, it was no longer waiting. The stage lights burned brighter as the music reached its peak, and for a moment the entire square seemed to lean forward as one. Ethan barely noticed. His attention had narrowed to the thin strip of space behind the stage, to the faint haze that clung there like breath in cold air. It didn't belong. Not like this. Buddy pulled again, harder than before, and this time Ethan didn't stop him. He stepped forward, heart pounding, dragging Tommy gently behind him as he moved closer to the backstage entrance. The boy clutched his hand, wide-eyed, sensing that something had shifted, that the night had tilted in a way adults didn't want to explain. "Sir," Mark said sharply, grabbing Ethan's arm, "you can't go back there." Ethan shook him off. "Then call it what it is," he said. "Stop pretending this is just a dog problem." Mark hesitated, caught off guard by the edge in Ethan's voice. In that brief pause, Buddy surged ahead. His shoulder slammed into the thin red ribbon strung across the backstage entrance, the plastic clips snapping with a brittle crack. The ribbon fell limp against the snow. Gasps rippled nearby. Laura spun around, fury flashing across her face. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "Are you out of your mind?" Ethan didn't answer. He stepped through the broken boundary, Buddy at his side now, moving with grim purpose. The hum of the heaters grew louder back here, an uneven mechanical sound that set Ethan's teeth on edge. The air felt thicker, heavier, carrying a faint sweetness that made his stomach churn. "Ethan!" Laura shouted. "Get back here now!" Buddy stopped suddenly, nose lifted, body rigid. He stared at a cluster of equipment near the rear corner of the stage, where tarps were pulled too tight, cords disappearing beneath them. The fake snow machine hissed softly, releasing another plume into the air. Ethan swallowed. He knew that smell. He hadn't wanted to. He hadn't expected to. But it was there, unmistakable once you'd learned it the hard way. "Mark," he said without turning, "we have a problem." Mark stepped in behind him, his own expression shifting as the smell reached him. "What the hell is that?" Before Ethan could respond, a figure moved in the shadows. The man with the tool bag stepped out from behind the equipment, eyes darting. Up close, he looked younger than Ethan had expected, his face pale, jaw clenched tight. "You shouldn't be back here," the man said quickly. His voice was calm, but his hands were not. They shook as he adjusted the strap of the bag. But he growled, low and unyielding. "Who are you?" Mark demanded. "Maintenance," the man said. "Too fast." "Everything's fine. You need to clear this area." Ethan stared at him. "Then why is my dog trying to tear it apart?" The man's eyes flicked to Buddy, then to the open space beyond the stage where the crowd waited, cheering. The sound felt distant now, muffled, like it was coming from underwater. "I said everything's fine," the man repeated, backing away. Behind them, the music swelled again. On stage, Frank Collins raised his arms, laughter booming as fake snow fell heavier, sparkling under the lights. He took a breath to speak, and staggered. Ethan's heart lurched. "Frank!" The man bolted. Mark swore and took off after him, shouting into his radio. Laura's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and panicked, demanding answers that no one had time to give. Buddy barked once, then broke into a run, dragging Ethan toward the equipment. His injured paw struck the ground hard, blood spattering the snow, but he didn't slow. He slammed his weight against one of the tarps, tearing it loose. A hiss erupted beneath it, sharp and ugly. Ethan recoiled as the smell intensified, his eyes stinging. "Gas!" he shouted. "Get people back!" On stage, Frank's smile vanished. He clutched at his chest, breath coming in shallow, uneven pulls. The laughter died around him, replaced by confused murmurs. "Something's wrong with Santa," someone said. Frank took one step forward, then another. Then his knees buckled. The crowd screamed. Ethan turned just in time to see Frank collapse under the lights, red suit stark against the white drift of artificial snow. Children cried. Parents surged forward, then back again, as panic rippled through the square. Buddy howled, a raw, desperate sound that cut through the noise. Ethan ran. He didn't think about the rules, or the cameras, or the eyes on him. He vaulted the low barrier at the edge of the stage, Buddy right behind him, and dropped to his knees beside Frank. The man's face had gone gray, his chest barely moving. "Frank," Ethan said, shaking him gently. "Stay with me." Frank's eyes fluttered, unfocused. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Behind them, the heaters continued to hum, pumping invisible danger into the cold night air. The music had stopped now. So had the cheering. All that remained was confusion, fear, and the terrible understanding that whatever Buddy had smelled had arrived. And it was no longer hiding. The cheering collapsed into screams so fast it felt unreal, as if someone had reached out and switched the night off. The speakers crackled once and went silent. Snow continued to drift down, artificial and real blending together, settling on shoulders that were suddenly hunched with fear. Ethan knelt beside Frank Collins, one hand at the man's shoulder, the other hovering near his chest, afraid of doing the wrong thing, but more afraid of doing nothing. Frank's skin felt clammy through the thick red fabric. His breathing came shallow and uneven, each breath a struggle that rattled faintly in his throat. "Frank, look at me," Ethan said, leaning close so his voice could cut through the noise. "You need to stay awake." Frank's eyes fluttered, unfocused, glassy. His lips moved without sound. Around them, people surged forward and back again in confused waves. Parents grabbed children. Someone shouted for space. Another voice yelled that Santa had fainted, that it was probably just the heat, that everyone needed to calm down. Buddy planted himself between Frank and the crowd, legs spread wide, chest heaving. He barked sharply whenever someone stepped too close, not in anger, but in warning. His injured paw left dark smears on the stage floor as he shifted, but he didn't seem to notice the pain. His entire body was tuned to one purpose now: protect. "Call 911, Ethan shouted. "I already did." Laura's voice came back, thin and strained. She stood near the edge of the stage, phone pressed to her ear, the clipboard forgotten at her feet. The confidence she had worn all evening was gone, replaced by naked fear. "They're on their way." Deputy Mark Reyes pushed through the crowd, breathless, his face tight. "Everyone back," he yelled. "Get back now." He waved people away, coughing as the air thickened. Only then did the smell reach the wider crowd, faint but unmistakable, sweet and wrong. Confusion turned to panic as people realized this wasn't a simple collapse. This wasn't exhaustion or stage fright. "This way," Mark shouted, directing people toward the open square. "Away from the stage!" Ethan glanced toward the backstage area. The tarp Buddy had torn loose flapped uselessly in the cold breeze, revealing the heater beneath it, a hose hanging at an unnatural angle. Frost clung to the metal, glittering under the lights like a lie dressed up as something harmless. "Gas," Ethan said, hoarse. "It's gas." Mark's eyes widened. He grabbed his radio. "All units, we have a gas leak at the town square. Evacuate immediately. Shut down power if you can." Behind them, someone screamed. Ethan turned back to Frank. He tilted the man's head carefully, checking his airway, fighting the rising dread in his chest. Frank's chest barely moved now. His breaths were coming slower, farther apart. Buddy whined softly and pressed his head against Ethan's arm, eyes locked on Frank's face as if willing him to breathe. "Stay with me," Ethan murmured to both of them. "You hear me? Stay." A volunteer knelt on the other side, shaking, trying to help but not knowing how. Another man ripped off his coat and tried to fan the air uselessly. Time stretched and twisted. Seconds felt thick and heavy. Frank's chest stilled. "No," Ethan whispered. He pressed his ear closer, searching for breath, for movement, for anything. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. He began chest compressions, counting under his breath, every motion precise, muscle memory taking over as fear tried to claw its way in. Buddy let out a low, broken sound, something between a whine and a howl, and then fell silent, watching. Mark returned, eyes red, coughing harder now. "EMS is 2 minutes out," he said. "We have to move him." Ethan shook his head. "Not yet. The air's worse back there. We need him here." Another wave of people rushed past, fleeing the square. Somewhere, a child cried for Santa, the words slicing through Ethan like a blade. He kept counting, kept pressing, kept breathing for Frank when Frank could not. The night felt wrong without music, without laughter, without belief. When the sirens finally cut through the cold air, sharp and urgent, Ethan nearly sagged with relief. Red and blue lights flashed against the snow, painting the square in harsh color. Paramedics ran in, masks already pulled tight over their faces. "What happened?" one of them demanded. "Gas exposure," Ethan said, moving aside reluctantly as they took over. He collapsed on stage. He stopped breathing. They worked quickly, efficiently, oxygen masks, equipment snapping into place with practiced speed. Buddy backed away just enough to let them through, but refused to leave the stage, eyes never leaving Frank. One of the paramedics glanced at the dog, then at Ethan. "He yours?" Ethan nodded. "That dog's the only reason we're not picking up a body right now," the man said quietly, before turning back to his work. As they loaded Frank onto the stretcher, his chest finally rose, shallow but real, a thin thread of life pulling him back. A collective breath seemed to move through the square as people realized Santa was alive. Barely. Buddy sagged then, the tension draining from him all at once. He lowered himself to the stage floor, exhausted, bloodied paw tucked beneath him. Ethan knelt beside him, one hand buried in the dog's thick fur, the other shaking as the weight of what had nearly happened settled in. Christmas lights flickered overhead, still glowing, still beautiful. But the magic was gone. In its place was something far heavier and far more real. After the ambulance doors slammed shut and the sirens faded into the distance, the square fell into a strange, hollow quiet. It wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that follows something breaking when no one is sure what comes next. Snow continued to fall, soft and steady, settling over footprints and tire tracks as if trying to erase what had just happened. Ethan remained on the edge of the stage, one knee pressed into the cold wood, his hand resting on Buddy's back. The dog lay still now, sides rising and falling in short, uneven breaths. His injured paw was tucked beneath his chest, dark with blood that had already begun to stiffen in the freezing air. "You did good," Ethan whispered, though his voice trembled. "You did everything right." Buddy didn't lift his head. His eyes followed the ambulance lights until they vanished, then drifted back to Ethan, heavy with exhaustion, but still alert, still listening. Deputy Mark Reyes moved through the thinning crowd, directing people away from the square and toward warmth and safety. His usual steady confidence was gone. He stopped near Ethan and looked down at Buddy, then at the torn tarp behind the stage, the exposed heater hissing faintly before firefighters shut it down completely. "I should have listened," Mark said quietly. Ethan didn't respond right away. His hands were shaking now that the urgency had passed, the adrenaline draining from his body in heavy waves. "We all should have," he said finally. "That's how this works. Everyone waits until it's obvious." Mark nodded, jaw tight. "We found the hose. It was loosened. Not enough to scream danger, just enough to leak." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. That faint sweetness in the air. The way Buddy had reacted before anyone else felt it, before anyone wanted to believe it. "Someone did this," Ethan said. "Yes," Mark replied, and he ran. Ethan looked up sharply. "The man with the tool bag?" Mark met his gaze. "You saw him too." "I saw Buddy see him." Mark let out a slow breath. "We've got units searching the perimeter. Roads are slick, if he didn't get far." A sudden cough interrupted him. Not from the crowd, from behind the stage. Buddy's head lifted instantly, his ears pricked forward, his body tensing despite the fatigue. A low sound rolled out of him again, weak but unmistakable. Warning. Ethan was on his feet in an instant, pulling Buddy gently but firmly back. "No," he said. "Stay. You've done enough." Mark raised his hand and motioned to two firefighters. "Check it out," he said. They moved cautiously, flashlights cutting through the shadows. One of them bent down near the equipment, lifting a loose board that had been part of the stage decoration. Beneath it, the snow was disturbed, marked by a clear boot print, the same deep tread Ethan had glimpsed earlier. "He was here after the collapse," the firefighter said. Mark swore under his breath and spoke into his radio, his voice sharp now, focused. "We have fresh tracks heading toward the service road. He's on foot." For a brief moment, everything felt suspended. The square, the town, Christmas itself. Ethan's gaze drifted to the hospital in the distance, hidden beyond the trees and the curve of the road. Frank Collins lay there now, between life and death, breathing because a dog had refused to be quiet. Buddy whined softly and shifted, trying to stand. His legs wobbled, then held. He took one tentative step forward, nose lifting again, searching the air. "No," Ethan said, kneeling beside him. He cradled Buddy's head gently, pressing his forehead against the dog's. "It's over. Let them handle it." Buddy hesitated, then sagged, his strength finally giving way. He leaned fully into Ethan, a heavy, trusting weight. Nearby, Laura Bennett sat on a folding chair, her face pale, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She looked older now, the sharp edge worn away by shock. When her eyes met Ethan's, she stood and walked toward him. "I'm sorry," she said. The words seemed to cost her. "I kept pushing. I didn't want to see it." Ethan nodded once. "Most people don't." She swallowed. "Is Frank—" "He's alive," Ethan said. "For now." Laura closed her eyes, relief and guilt colliding in her expression. "That dog saved him." Ethan looked down at Buddy. Snow had settled into the dog's fur, melting slowly from his warmth. He tried to tell us long before that. The firefighters finished securing the area, their movements slower now, deliberate. The danger had passed, but its shadow lingered. The square that had been filled with laughter only minutes ago now felt hollow, stripped of its illusion. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed again, faint and far away. Buddy lifted his head once more, just briefly, and let out a tired sigh. His eyes closed. For 3 long minutes earlier that night, Santa Claus had hovered on the edge of death while music played and snow fell and people clapped. Now, in the quiet aftermath, the truth settled in. If Buddy had been ignored just a little longer, there would have been no sirens, no hospital, no second chances, only a body on a stage, and a Christmas that would never have been forgiven. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and old coffee, a sharp contrast to pine and snow and burned gas. Ethan sat in a hard plastic chair outside the emergency room, his coat still dusted white, Buddy lying at his feet on a borrowed blanket. The dog's paw had been cleaned and wrapped by a nurse who spoke softly, the way people do when they finally understand what they are touching. Neither of them slept. Every time a set of doors opened, Ethan looked up. Every time a cart rolled past, Buddy's ears twitched. The night had not let go of them yet. Deputy Mark Reyes arrived just after midnight, his uniform damp, his face drawn tight by cold and hours without rest. He nodded once at Ethan before lowering himself into the chair across from him. "They found him," Mark said. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Alive?" "Yes, barely." Mark rubbed his hands together, then stopped, as if realizing how useless the motion was indoors. He lost control on the service road, slid into the trees, tried to run, didn't get far. Ethan nodded. He felt no relief, only a dull heaviness. "Who is he?" "Name's Calvin Ross, goes by Cal, not local." Mark's jaw clenched. "We pulled his phone records, burner phones, online accounts tied to live stream betting. He wasn't after Frank, not personally." "Then why?" Ethan asked. Mark looked past him, down the long corridor. "Chaos pays, panic spikes views. People bet on disruption now. Accidents that happen live." He loosened the hose just enough. Figured someone would get sick. Didn't care who. Ethan's hand curled slowly into a fist. He looked down at Buddy, who lay still but alert, eyes open, listening. "He didn't count on a dog," Ethan said. Mark gave a grim half-smile. "No, he didn't." A doctor appeared moments later, his expression tired but steady. "Frank Collins is stable," he said. "We're keeping him overnight, but he's breathing on his own now. He's asking questions. Mostly about Santa things." Ethan laughed quietly, the sound breaking loose from somewhere deep in his chest. His shoulders sagged as the tension finally began to ease. "Can we see him?" Ethan asked. "In a bit," the doctor said. His gaze dropped to Buddy. "That your dog?" "Yes." The doctor nodded. Then he should be there, too. They waited another half hour before being allowed into the room. Frank lay propped up against white pillows, the red suit gone, replaced by a thin hospital gown. His skin was pale, but his eyes were clear. When he saw Ethan, a weak smile tugged at his mouth. "Well," Frank said hoarsely, "that's one way to end a show." Ethan stepped closer, careful. "You scared us." Frank's eyes shifted to the floor, to Buddy. The dog rose slowly, favoring his injured paw, and padded to the side of the bed. He stood there, quiet, tail still, watching Frank with unwavering focus. Frank swallowed. His hand trembled as he lowered it, resting it gently on Buddy's head. "This fellow," he murmured. "He wouldn't leave me, would he?" "No," Ethan said. He knew something was wrong before anyone else did. Frank closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they were wet. "Figures," he said. "I always trusted dogs more than crowds." Silence settled in the room, thick but not uncomfortable. Machines hummed softly. Outside, the night pressed on. After a moment, Frank looked back at Ethan. "You remember that fire on Cedar Street? Years ago?" Ethan nodded slowly. "You pulled me out?" Frank smiled faintly. "Didn't feel like a choice at the time. Just did what I could." Ethan's throat tightened. He glanced at Buddy again, understanding something he hadn't allowed himself to see before. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't luck. Buddy had smelled the gas, yes, but he had also smelled fear, familiar danger, the echo of something that had once almost taken his person away. He wasn't just saving Santa, Ethan said quietly. He was paying a debt. Frank's hand rested on Buddy's head, fingers sinking into thick fur. "Then I'd say we're even," he said. Outside the room, Mark watched through the glass for a moment before turning away. He pulled out his phone and typed a brief update that would ripple outward by morning. Not about the criminal, not about the live stream, about a golden retriever who refused to be ignored. When Ethan finally left the hospital, dawn was beginning to thin the darkness. Snow still covered Maple Ridge, pristine again, as if the night had not torn itself open hours earlier. Buddy walked beside him, limping but steady, nose lifting to the clean morning air. For the first time since Christmas Eve had begun, Buddy relaxed. The danger had passed, but the truth had settled in, and neither of them would ever forget what it had cost to be heard. Christmas morning arrived quietly in Maple Ridge, as if the town itself had learned to move more gently. The square was empty now, the stage dismantled piece by piece, the lights still glowing but dimmer in the pale winter sun. Snow lay smooth and undisturbed again, hiding the scars of panic and footprints and blood, pretending nothing had ever gone wrong. But people remembered. They remembered how laughter had turned to silence, how belief had cracked, how close they had come to losing something they thought was untouchable. Ethan stood at the edge of the square with Buddy beside him, the dog's bandaged paw wrapped neatly, his posture calm but alert. They had come back early, before the town stirred, before questions and explanations and cameras found them. Ethan needed to see the place again, to make sure it was real, to let it settle. Buddy sniffed the cold air, then sat, tail resting on the snow. He looked older somehow, not weaker, just changed. News spread quickly that day, not about Calvin Ross, not about live-stream betting or sabotage. That part came later, buried in reports and court dates and quiet outrage. What spread first was the story people needed to hear. A golden retriever smelled danger on Christmas Eve. A dog tried to warn them. A man dressed as Santa almost died, and didn't. By noon, the square filled again, cautiously this time, not for celebration, but for something closer to gratitude. People brought coffee, blankets, handwritten signs. Children stood at a respectful distance, holding their parents' hands, staring at Buddy as if he were something new in the world. Frank Collins arrived just after lunch, moving slowly, supported by a cane he didn't really need, but accepted anyway. He wore a heavy coat and a knit cap instead of red velvet. When he saw Buddy, he stopped. "Well," Frank said, voice still rough but warm. "There you are." Buddy stood and walked to him, careful, dignified. Frank bent with effort and placed a familiar red Santa hat gently on the dog's head. It slipped over one ear, crooked and ridiculous. For the first time since the night before, people laughed, not loudly, not carelessly, the kind of laughter that releases something tight in the chest. Frank rested a hand on Buddy's head and looked around at the crowd. "I don't have much of a speech," he said. "Turns out I'm not very good at those without a beard on." A few smiles flickered. "But I know this. If that dog hadn't refused to be quiet, I wouldn't be standing here. Christmas would look very different today." He paused, swallowing. "So would I." People clapped then, slow at first, then stronger. They didn't clap for Santa. They clapped for the dog who had been ignored, for the man who had listened anyway, for the lesson they hadn't wanted but needed. Later, as the crowd thinned and the light shifted toward afternoon, Ethan sat on a bench with Buddy's head resting against his leg. The square hummed softly with conversation, but the edge was gone. Something steadier had taken its place. Laura Bennett approached, hands in her coat pockets, her face calmer than it had been in days. "We're changing how we do things," she said. "Safety checks, no shortcuts, no ignoring the uncomfortable signs." Ethan nodded. "That's good." She glanced at Buddy. He saved more than one life that night. Ethan looked down at the dog, at the steady rise and fall of his chest. He saved the right one. As evening approached, lights flickered on again across Maple Ridge. This time, no music blared, no artificial snow fell. Just quiet, real winter, and people moving through it with more care than before. At home, Ethan built a small fire and sat on the floor beside Buddy. The dog curled close, warmth shared, eyes half-lidded. The house smelled like wood and coffee and something solid. Outside, the world went on. Stories faded, headlines moved on, but some things stayed. A reminder that danger doesn't always shout, that it doesn't always look like a threat, that sometimes it arrives softly, hidden beneath celebration and noise, and sometimes the only one willing to speak up is the one who cannot speak at all. Buddy slept, finally at peace, and Christmas, bruised but breathing, went on. If this story moved you even just a little, let us know. Simply comment 1 if you believe animals sense danger before we do. Or comment 0 if you think no one would have survived without Buddy that night. We read every comment, and your voice helps keep these stories alive. And if you want to hear more true stories about quiet heroes, unexpected courage, and moments that change lives forever, please subscribe to this channel. The next story is already waiting for you.